And this evening on Africa World Hour, we examine a provocative legal question at the intersection of sovereignty, constitutional law, and global politics. An article by Jozias Mahube-Reinecke argues that the 2025 lobbying efforts by AfriForum, Solidariteit, and Lex Libertas in the United States may not simply be advocacy, but really raises questions under South Africa's common law of treason. It's an argument that pushes the boundaries of how we understand coercion, foreign influence, and the limits of our own constitutional order, particularly on land, property, and sovereignty. Joining us now in the studio, freelance journalist Jozias Mahube-Reinecke, who unpacks the law, the politics, and deeper philosophical challenge at the heart of this debate. Himself, legal studies, what shall we call you now? A practitioner? Are you practicing? Or?
No, I'm just recently graduated, finished last year.
Okay. So, very interesting article. So, you're essentially asking whether lobbying a foreign power could meet the threshold for treason. What brought this thought to mind? Was it because of what you were interacting with in your legal studies, looking at what is happening in the country, geopolitics?
Well, the first interest for me is that I do believe that your AfriForum, Solidariteit, Lex Libertas, they act outside of the scope of the law in terms of certain actions, certain lobbying narratives that they make. So when I saw that they went to the United States of America to go lobby for a change of the internal legal system, the question that I thought was, why is this not seen as treasonous? Because the warfare in the current dispensation of which we are in is no longer physical, on-the-ground, foot soldier warfare. It has transpired to economic warfare that, like you can see with the United States and Iran currently, the United States very reluctant to put soldiers on the ground because it's becoming an economic resource war. So that made me very interested in this issue of why is the state very reluctant to actually want to charge AfriForum and the defenders of private property, as I like to call them, with treason.
So when you say they operate outside of the law, is that, are you making a political argument, or is there common law to support this? Are there things that you can point to and say, and we're not getting into the treason argument just yet, but what is it that they do that you believe they're operating outside of the law?
Well, I think...
And which laws?
I think firstly, before I go into that, I need to make the disclaimer that I am a student of the Zanyan philosophical tradition. And within this philosophical tradition is a belief that in order to gain actual justice within the current dispensation, there needs to be a restoration of title to territory of the indigenous people of Southern Africa, because from this tradition, there isn't a belief within the Constitution holding legitimacy on the basis of why does Section 25 have to be the longest section within the Constitution, and raises the questions of, well, what then is the result of the negotiated settlement of 1994? Why is so much private property and white economic interests protected more than the livelihoods and interests of the common black person in this country? So I think in that sense, it's more of a philosophical argument that I'm making, that AfriForum is allowed to put cases forward, target individuals such as Julius Malema with singing "Shoot the farmer, kill the boer." I mean, myself, I'm an Afrikaner, I'm a boer, and I'll sing that song gladly and freely, because I feel like there's a victimization on specific black individuals by these groups.
And since you took us there, do you say that as a member of an EFF because you buy into the philosophy, or are you arguing that's from a different perspective? Because, I mean, no doubt there are a lot of people who are looking at you curiously saying, how's this white boer boy now making these arguments?
No, I mean, I've been asked, like, am I paid, like, is there like promotions, and like none of that. So I am a member of the EFF. I served as the Student Representative Council deployed by the EFF in 2021. However, through my studies, I hold 3 degrees in 3 different fields. So
please list them so that the people know that you are saying this.
No, my first undergraduate degree was in a Bachelor's of Political Science, majoring in International Relations. Then I did my honors degree in anthropology, studying how amapiano can be a contemporary street culture. And then I finished my LLB degree as well. So with all of the education I've received, I'm allowed to make analysis that don't need to be seen as a rhetoric of being a party member. As much as I'm a supporter and believe with all my heart that the EFF should be running this country, my analysis of the AfriForum and the targeting of Julius Malema is of my own opinion.
Okay, so we'll get to that song in just a moment. Let's now get into the principles. South African common law, treason, it hinges on hostile intent. So how are you stretching this concept, just in terms of, are you confident that the court would accept that economic pressure is equivalent to coercion in the traditional sense?
Well, yeah, I think that's why the Zanyan philosophical tradition is very important to use to analyze the common law of treason. Because we must remember the common law of treason was adopted at a time where there was a lot of overt violence, where it's the time of rebellion, where you have individuals who are fighting against an oppressive regime who are going to then be charged with treason. In the current dispensation, we did not amend the common law of treason. We inherited it from the previous regime. So now, for me, it becomes contradictory to now want to impose a common law principle that was applied to more so oppressing black people fighting for rights, to now apply that in a dispensation of which we're supposed to be all supposed to be equal. So when you look at the principles of common law of treason, the first principle is that there needs to be an overt act. The second principle is that there needs to be an allegiance to the state. And then the third principle is the most crucial one, is that there has to be a hostile intent. And that's where the courts have not developed what hostile means within the aspect of hostile intent. So I'm arguing to say that we can no longer look at hostile intent as an overt physical act of violence, because there have been repercussions from what has happened from this lobbying group. We have issues of US aid being pulled out. We have issues of the AGOA agreement being in now a place of instability, where there's actual economic implications that the state is facing due to this lobbying group
being sanctioned by the United States as a result of perceived white genocide.
Yes, and the thing is that I'm not sure what white genocide as well, because I mean, I think recently came out saying that they never said there was white genocide, but
yeah,
we must never forget that when you look at what Solidariteit and AfriForum have done, before they went to the United States, they wrote memorandums where they published stating what they want, where they lined out all of the laws in the country which are racialized against white individuals. And that in itself is already showing that they have an intention when they went to the United States. They had an intention to influence the internal dispensation. Because one of the major reasons for them going to the United States is the Land Expropriation Without Compensation Act, which got enacted in 2024. So their trip was not by chance. It was very strategic. Their trip to the United States is halting the implication and allowing for land expropriation without compensation to actually become a reality in our country.
So they used that trip to engage the United States to shift domestic advocacy into the terrain of foreign influence. That's what you're saying. Isn't that politics, though? Don't different political interests look for power and influence from international actors, with a state or not, in order to advance their political standing?
I think it's when we look at, because remember in South Africa we suffer from rainbow nationism, this mania of the rainbow nation. So now when we want to look at history from that angle, it's very ahistorical. When you actually look at how the country came to be, the negotiated settlement between the National Party and the ANC was a settlement of, okay, we're going to give the ANC political freedom, but when it comes to private property rights, it is protecting white economic interest and white capital. So through that negotiated settlement is why AfriForum is doing what they're doing today. They are going and lobbying not for political interest, they're going for the reality of how land expropriation without compensation is a direct attack on white economic interest. And that in itself is what drives AfriForum, Lex Libertas and Solidariteit to want to go lobby and say that there's a white genocide. Because through the white genocide narrative, it has also redrawn the lines of being and non-being within the world. Because why is it that only the minority of this country, the Afrikaners, have been given a legal enactment in the United States of America of a refugee status? By doing that, it's then stating that all other tribal groups within South Africa are not seen as human beings, or not seen as their issues, or being seen as as important as a minority of white Afrikaners within the nation. So it's also recreating this perception of South Africa that white people are being crucified and persecuted, but white individuals own majority of the wealth and land. So it's also a lot deeper narrative, a lot deeper issue that AfriForum is doing. So that's why I'm trying
So how deep does it go? Because, I mean, the criticism often is there's lack of structural reform in South Africa, and that's why the poor keep getting poorer and the rich richer, and the so-called 1%ers when it comes to land ownership in this country. And I think also the fact that, and government by own, it does not know how much land, you know, it owns in this country. So are you saying basically they are trying to maintain the status quo and actually reverse it?
I think that what they're trying to do is trying to ensure that what was given to them in 1994, not AfriForum specifically, I'm saying white capital.
Yes, absolutely.
What was granted to them and promised to white capital in 94, what's happening now is just to solidify that in order to make sure that, okay, Section 25 cannot be touched. Private property rights has to be more important than the restoration of title of territory to the indigenous individuals of this country that we are in. So I think that it becomes a lot deeper because the media and a lot of the history and what we're seeing is not actually going into the actual problem, what AfriForum is doing to the country and the perception. Because now with what you're posing to me now is that's kind of a mentality I think we shouldn't be having in South Africa. I think we should understand
which part when you say
the part of, you know, the rich get richer, the poor get poorer because of structural issues. Those structural issues comes down to one main thing, and that's land reform.
And that's what was the question that I'm asking. How do we frame it? Because as you say, without the land, people cannot be empowered. And if you, I mean, as we often hear in the comrade rhetoric, owning the means of production. So that's what I was asking. That is that basically what you see AfriForum is doing. And then let me move you on to the next question. Is there a causal link? If somebody was going to take this up and go to court and say, look, based on this argument, and you know, the project of a democratic South Africa, which we were promised as people, is there a causal link to that in the courts?
So you're asking, is there a causal link between
the fact that there was a promise that was made about a democratized South Africa.
Yes.
And now we're saying AfriForum is going to do this. And that's when I was asking, are you saying that they're trying to maintain the status quo? So can we go then to the courts? If somebody wanted to take up this fight and say, well, based on this, and not only are they going against that agreement that they signed of democratizing, but they're actually trying to roll back the gains that were attained through democracy, and that is South Africa should be for all.
I think that's also where I think they're not trying to keep the status quo, because I think the status quo right now, if you go speak to a majority of South Africans, will argue in saying that no, there needs to be an issue of land redistribution in this country. So I don't think they're trying to keep the status quo, because the status quo is wanting change. I think currently what they're trying to do is just to solidify not just internal interests of white capital, but also foreign investment. Because remember, when it comes to land expropriation, we're also speaking about the mines having to be given access to communities. So that in itself is a big threat to foreign direct investment. So this issue is a major issue. That's actually beyond, like, that's why I say it's an economic attack on
more about white capital interests, which you're saying.
Yes.
Okay, so then what next? Are there any precedents? I mean, you argue that coercion can constitute treason. Do you anticipate that cases like that can fall within the realm of modern economic warfare that you point to? So what the United States is doing now, is it something that could even go to, because it is being framed within the realm of sovereignty, domestic policy. But is there something that we can argue about it constituting treason, not only for AfriForum, but even going to a global court to say this is coercion. And
I think there is a fair case for that, because like I said earlier, is that the warfare at the moment is very much an economic based way of going forward and going about warfare in the current world order that we're in. I mean, look, countries like USA and Iran, they have nukes, right? They have the power to want to actually cause real warfare. However, they're very reluctant. It's an issue of economics. So I think on a global scale, the issue of wanting to put a state into a submission to now influence your internal policies and internal sovereignty, I think that should constitute as treason. Because in the real question also to ask is South Africa truly a sovereign state? Because if we were truly sovereign, we would not allow the bullying and submission of the United States to limit our internal application of land expropriation without compensation. So I think that's also another question that needs to be raised about this, is whom is the actual sovereign in our state? Is it the state or is it capital? That's something I think that also is coming about.
That's a very dangerous question to ask.
Very much.
And how do you anticipate it will be answered?
Well, I think firstly, I'd say people must read, honestly. So I think people must go and engage with current philosophical texts, with Mahube-Reinecke, Dr. Ntomiso Tladla, Joel Mediri, Sanela Sebanda. Go and read Azanian philosophical tradition readings, actually engage and understand how is it we came to this constitutional order.
In a soundbite, what would you say to those who are interested in reading and understanding? How would you explain to them what it is, what is behind the philosophy, what does it teach?
Well, the Azanian philosophical tradition teaches, one, it's an abolitionist belief, in the belief that the constitution needs to be abolished and rewritten. Doesn't believe in not having a constitution. Believes that the constitution can't be legitimate because it was written by the elite and not by the people. And that the main crux of it is, in order to be a sovereign state, there needs to be a restoration of title of territory to the indigenous. So now if South Africa hasn't done that, so from the Azanian perspective, the state is not the sovereign, because whom are the individuals that are holding the land? It's white capital and also foreign investment.
I need to ask this question of allegiance.
Yes.
Not only what obviously you're saying AfriForum should be held to, because that's the issue of treason, but people who'd be asking you about your own allegiance as a white Afrikaner young man.
Yes.
How would you answer that question? Because there'd be your loyalty is being questioned, and loyalty to whom and why?
No, 100%. I think my loyalty is to the social polity of Azania. That is what my loyalty is. I know that I'm a African only by colonial descent. As a white person in South Africa, I'm a proud person to say I'm a white Afrikaner, but my loyalty isn't, if I can say, tribalist, where I'm only loyal to my skin color, my tribe. That's not at all it. My loyalty lies in actually eradicating inequality and finding justice for the current South African dispensation that we're in.
But somebody would probably ask, who taught you that? Because there's so many people of your skin color in this country who subscribe to the white supremacy ideology.
Yes.
So they would ask, what happened to you? How did you arrive here?
Yes. How did I arrive here? I have to say that's who I engaged with, my lectures that I've had over the years, such as Joel Mediri, Ntomiso Tladla, really actually engaging with very critical texts. That's actually what shaped. And also not being a scared white person, actually engaging in student politics, not being scared to engage with black people. So I think that's the biggest fear white people have.
Is there hope for other young white people in this country who are afraid of black people, who, when they see a black woman or black man down the street, are quickly locking themselves up or, protecting themselves against the unknown?
There is hope. I do think that there is hope. Just it starts with white people. It doesn't start with black people. White people have to educate whites on how not to be racist and how to utilize our white privilege in a beneficial way that's not going to create further stratification throughout society.
And what would you say is your parting shot? What way would that be?
What way would that be?
how to utilize their whiteness and privilege for the greater good of South Africans?
Oh, well, that one I will say is quite a big, broad question. But I think on the very surface level, I'd say that whiteness and white privilege means that you have access to resources and access to business. I would say rather utilize that to uplift communities instead of putting family members into those positions. That's what I would say as a starting point.
Jozias Mahube-Reinecke, thank you so much for coming to join us. It's my last show here on Africa World Hour.
Thank
And this
you.
kind of conversation is what I've always wanted to have. Like, just, go against the grain and go where, as they say, angels fear to tread. And the reason I say that is that there should never be fear in educating yourself and in upending what you're taught to believe. And I thank you for coming to have that conversation here with me in the studio.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm very grateful.
And that's how we come to the end of Africa World Hour. It is exactly 10 o'clock. Shayla Ntukumana up next with African Diaries. And Mphosa Tole will be your new host as of tomorrow. Join me in the morning. I'll be up in the next few hours. I am dreading it. With me and Peter Ndoro for Rise and Shine.
1 hour, 1 continent, 1 voice. Africa World Hour with Tsepiso Makwetla on Channel Africa, the African perspective.